Morning. We're all familiar with the little piece, footprints in the sand. I don't need to explain it. Peers down during the most difficult times in this person's life. There's one set of footprints. He's concerned about that. Understands there's one set of footprints because it's during those times that the Father carried the individual writing, and that brings a lot of comfort. When we look at the Israelites going through the wilderness, we find a lot of times where there were very difficult times. But in those places where they went through difficulties, we don't find footprints. What we find is heel marks. That rather than experiencing rest as they go through those times, they get caught up in resistance. And they drag their heels. They don't want to go any further. They want to go back to where they came from. It's too difficult. Heel marks in the sand. And there was a possibility of experiencing something different because God did not want them to have to experience their resistance. He wanted them to experience footprints in the sand. He wanted them to be able to look back on their life and see that He carried them. And I guess the question that we'll need to consider this morning, then, is how do we turn heel marks into footprints? How to turn heel marks into footprints. Look at the passage from Hebrews 4, 1 through 2. We're working our way through a couple of chapters in Hebrews, and this is what it says. Therefore, since the promise of entering His rest still stands, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. For we also have had the gospel preached to us, just as they did, but the message they heard was of no value to them, because those who heard did not combine it with faith. It talks about they, and what it's speaking about, the they, is the Israelites. And it says that they had the gospel preached to them. Gospel means good news. But the good news they were given did not benefit them because it was not combined with faith by them. They heard things, but they really didn't believe them. And he indicates because they didn't believe, they did not experience footprints in the sand. They experienced heel marks. God wanted them to experience His care. God wanted them to look back on their life and see one set of footprints, and He does the same with us. So here's the question then. We're going to get to the question. There it is. How can we turn heel marks into footprints? How can we turn heel marks into footprints? And the first thing we'll see, I think, know your heart to cultivate authenticity. Look what it says in Hebrews 12, verses 7 through 8 and verse 11. It's in your worship folder in the sheet written there. It says, endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as sons. For what son is not disciplined by his father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are illegitimate children and not true sons. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. It seems to indicate that disappointments are inevitable. It says, endure hardship as discipline. What God is treating you as sons, for what son is not disciplined by his father? Discipline doesn't mean punishment here. We've said it before. The difference between discipline and punishment is with punishment, you're thinking of what somebody did wrong, and you're focusing on the past. With discipline, you're thinking about what they will do right. You get the difference there? Punishment is, I'm thinking about what you did wrong, and I need to even the scales, and my attitude is anger or wrath. Discipline is far different. With discipline, you're not thinking about what somebody did, you're thinking about what they will do. and your attitude is not wrath, it's love. With discipline, I create circumstances where someone I love will be able to do what is best for that individual to do. And that's the way we are to understand this. It says that we will experience discipline, and hardships are part of that discipline. Here's what it means then. Disappointments are inevitable. If you are someone with whom God has a relationship, because He cares, He will allow us to experience difficult things, and that means you, and you, and you, and you, and you. And it means that we will not be able to have what we want. Why? Because God doesn't care for us? No, because He does care for us. And if we always get what we want, we can't learn the things that He wants to teach us. We will not be able to do what we want to do. Now, I like to do what I want to do. But what God understands is that if I'm going to be the man He wants me to be, I'm going to have to learn to deal with not being able to do what I want to do. Not being able to have what I want to have. I would dare say that the greatest impediment to spiritual progress that we all deal with is that we have a very difficult time not having what we want to have. Would you agree with that? I say, and I've said it before, one of the most difficult things I do is dealing with me when me doesn't have what me wants. I pout. Now, I won't show you that. We do different things when we don't have what we want. Some of us pout and become self-pitying. Some of us get angry, but all of us deal with it, and we don't deal with it very well. In America, we can get what we want. And we, most of the time, have so many choices that we can indulge our desires. We're not very good at not getting what we want and not doing what we want. But it's not just that we can't have what we want. It's not just that we can't do what we want to do. What will happen, listen to me, this isn't great news, but it's the truth. God will bring us into places where we have what we don't want to have. Not just we don't have what we want, is that we will have what we don't want. We will be exposed to things not that we don't get a chance to pick up something that we'd really like to have, but we will have to pick up something we really don't want to have. Why? Because God doesn't care for us? No, because He does. And those things might be relationships. And they might be job problems. They might be frustrations with your boss. How many of us like problems at work? Recessions. How many of us like $4 a gallon? Now, I'm not saying that God is orchestrating $4 a gallon. We're going on a camping trip this week, and I'm not looking forward to going into the gas stations. Bring it up, but I'm going to have what I don't want. That doesn't mean God doesn't care for me or for any one of us. Not only will it mean that we will have what we don't want, we will do what we don't want as well. There's things that we don't want to do. I don't want to take care of that person. I don't want to have this thing. But we will deal with that because disappointments are inevitable. And they're not because God doesn't care, it's because He does care. We don't like to hold our disappointments. What would we rather do than hold them? We've talked about it some past weeks. Some of us hide them. How are you doing? Fine. And some of us aren't really good at admitting our disappointments. Some of us hide them. Others of us don't hide them. We hurl them. We get mad at somebody else. So rather than hold our disappointments and say, you know what, I'm disappointed with my life, we say, I'm disappointed with my life, and I know why. It's because I don't have the right wife, I don't have the right kids, I don't have the right job, I don't have the right boss. Now that might be so, but at some level, moving ahead spiritually means that we hold our disappointments without hiding them and without hurling them, that we learn to hold them. We don't naturally do this. And for all of us then, disappointments will, and I'm not saying that might, I'm just telling you what happens. And some of us are more in touch with this than others. When we are disappointed, we get pulled into a reaction where disappointments add up and become discouragement. We find ourselves saying, what's the use? And why do we say, what's the use? It's because the disappointments have built up. Disbelief will always turn disappointments into discouragement. So here's what you deal with, and here's what I deal with. The disappointments of our life build up, and they cause us to believe that we're not cared for. How do we deal with that? What do? We're pulled towards discouragement, craving. When craving goes on and on and on, you know what it's like? It's like having an upset stomach. And it starts to build up craving. We start to feel contempt. We feel contempt towards ourselves. If you're aware of an acute need, something you really want and you just haven't been able to get your hands on it, after a while, you will become conscious or not that there's something welling up inside that feels angry. I should have this. It's my fault. I should have this. It's your fault. And craving leads to contempt, leads to conflict. Craving, contempt, conflict. Craving, contempt, conflict. It's like a whirlpool. The faster it spins, the more difficult it is to get out. Craving, contempt, conflict. You know what happens when water goes out of a bathtub. At the top of the ring, it goes slow. But the longer this whirlpool, it goes faster and faster and faster and faster. And then when it gets it's very difficult to get out. How can we turn heel marks into footprints? How can we be disappointed without hiding, hurling, without becoming discouraged? That's the question. I always thought that if you knew God's promises, that you could just look at God. Just take your eyes off things and just look at God. In fact, Doug Anderson and I, we kind of have a thing where sometimes you'll hear individuals say, come to God and leave all your stuff behind. Just all the things of the world, the things of the week, the things of your life, just put them all behind and come to God. And what I would say, and Doug would say as well, don't do that. Bring everything to Him. Because it's those things underneath the surface. If we try to stuff those things, you know what ends up happening? We come to God half-heartedly. Half-heartedly. Our mouth is saying, oh, I love you, and our hearts are saying, frism. Bring everything to Him. We've got to learn to hold our disappointments and hold on to His promises at the same time. So when you come to God, bring all of you. Bring all of you. You have to. It's the only way. How can we turn heel marks into footprints? Know your heart. That is to cultivate authenticity. Know His promises. That's how you cultivate confidence. Know His promises in order to cultivate confidence. Look what it says in Hebrews 4:1 and 2 at the top. Therefore, since the promise of entering His rest still stands, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. For we also have had the gospel preached to us, just as they did. But the message they heard was of no value to them, because those who heard did not combine it with faith. A couple things. Disappointment is inevitable. And what we learn here is that rest is optional. Look at halfway through that verse. It says, well, let's read the whole thing again. This is a very interesting verse. You look down at it and read along with me silently as I read it. Therefore, since the promise of entering His rest still remains, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short. For we also have had the gospel preached to us, just as they did. But the message they heard was of no value to them, because those who heard did not combine it with faith. Gospel means good news. And here's what this verse is saying. God gave good news to the people. I have good news. Here's the promises that I want you to know. And He verbalized promises. The Israelites received promises. We received promises. And in that way, we're the same. We both have had promises proclaimed to us. What we will learn in just a minute is that the promises are different. But we have both had the promises of God spoken to us. The message they heard, the promises, were of no value to them. Listen to what it says. God can give promises to you and me. But those promises will be valueless if we don't believe them. Is that not what it's saying? Is that not what you see? God can make promises, but those promises become valuable when we mix them with faith. We'll talk more about that next week. It's like pouring two things into a jar. You might see it like epoxy. Epoxy, you take two cylinders of material. When you mix these materials together, then you've got a substance that is beneficial, that can glue things. It's the same thing with promises. You pour promises in, you mix faith with it, and then you got something. But promises, standing alone in a jar, as far as the Israelites were concerned, were of how much value to them? Zero. Rest is optional. God wanted them to experience rest, but rest means believing. We're believing the promises. Listen to what I'm saying. Some individuals will lead you to believe, probably, that the thing you need to do as a Christian is focus more on God's commands. I disagree. Their promise was not that they didn't know the commands. It wasn't that they didn't believe the commands. What does it say? They didn't believe the... Has that ever occurred to you? It occurs to me all the time. It just, the more I see it, the more it strikes me as true. Do you know what our issue is? We just don't look at His promises. When we have disappointments that lead to discouragement, it's like God's promises become irrelevant. Why? Because we think, oh sure, if you loved me, you'd give me what I want. So you see what happens? God's promises are our lifeline. If you're going through difficulties, God's promises are the things that you want to hang on to. They're not the thing that you want to set aside. Know His promises. That's the way to cultivate confidence. A couple promises. There's the Old Testament promises. Look what it says. Old Testament promises. In Exodus chapter 19, in the 3rd month after the Israelites left Egypt, on the very day, so 3 months after they left Egypt, they've gone through the Red Sea by this time. They've gone to Rephidim, where there was not any water for the people to drink. They had a water experience where God provided, and a wilderness experience where they experienced thirst. And here's what happened. After they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai. And Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. God led them through the Red Sea and through the wilderness. I bet you could speak about water experiences where you had times where you felt very close to God. It might have been a verse that you read, an experience of somebody coming alongside, but that God seemed very close. And if you're like me, it could have happened days afterwards. It went from a close experience to feeling like, where did God go? It's like He disappeared. That's what they experienced. And on the 3rd month, God brought them together and He called Moses. Let's read and see what happens. Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the house of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." God gives them good news. He says, if you will keep our agreement and do what I ask you to do, which is keep the 10 Commandments, then you will be part of my administration on the earth. It's not just that you will be my children, you will be part of my court. You will have jobs to fulfill. He gives them good news. He says you will be set apart for special treatment. this good news given to them did not benefit them, because when they became hungry and thirsty, they completely dropped their eyes off of these promises. And then the disbelief that occurred turned their disappointments into discouragement, and their heart became hard. And that's why rather than footprints, we find heel marks, because they forgot these things. They forgot them. God said, listen, if you do X, Y, Z, this is the good news. And what he wanted them to know is that you've got to focus on this, because we all need good news. When we look around at the circumstances of our life, we don't always see good things. Would you agree? I mean, we can look into a lot of different areas of our life and see things that aren't that good. That's true of all of us. And what God says, you're going to need to look at some good news, and you're not always going to find it in your home. Sometimes you have to purposefully look from your home to what He says, and you'll find something amazing happens when you do that. Heel marks become footprints. A sense of resistance starts to soothe. That when you understand that God is in you and with you, and good is ahead of you, guaranteed, when you look at that God is in you. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you. God is in you. And God is with you. And good is ahead of you. I know it's not around you right now. And it's guaranteed, because there's not anything you can do to cause God to rescind those promises. Now, this is good news, and what do you need to do in order for that good news to become powerful? Believe it. Okay, here's the question. Do you believe it? You're saying, Mike, I don't know if I believe it. You see my job. I get that. I get that. What He wants you to do is believe it even though your job doesn't show it. Believe it even though your checkbook doesn't show it. Believe it even though your relationships don't show it. Believe it even though your life doesn't show it. I don't care what you're going through. What God wants you to hear is this: I am in you. And I'm with you. And good is ahead of you. You. And it's guaranteed, because He'll forgive your wickedness and He'll remember your sin no more. There's nothing you can do to cause God to pull these promises back. What would happen if you believe these more? What happens when we believe these more? Life doesn't become, but something goes. Something settles inside. I'm not alone. We hate being alone, especially in difficult places. They didn't enter His rest. What did God do? He changed some things. Same principle. The same principle applies. When you receive good news, just like them, the similarity between the Israelites and us is we both get good news, and we both need to what? The good news. Believe the good news. Same principle applies. Same principle applies. It's not just about asking Jesus into your life, and that's it. We have to believe the good news in an ongoing way. The same principle, but one thing, the different promises. Different promises. What it says in Hebrews 8:6, but the ministry Jesus has received is as superior to theirs, as the covenant of which He is mediator is superior to the old one, and it is founded on better promises. And so the thing that God does, we still need to believe, but the promises that we are to believe have changed. This is critical. If you believe the wrong promises, you still get heel marks. Believe the right promises, And you can start to leave footprints. You can start to experience rest. I think so this is what it says. This is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will put my laws in their minds and write them on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will a man teach his neighbor or a man his brother, saying, know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest. For I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more. Let's break this down very quickly. This is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after that time. Look at it with me. I will put my laws in their minds and write them on their hearts. What that says is God in you. God in you. That's promise one. What God says, I will be in you, creating responsiveness in you. I do not leave you to cultivate a responsiveness alone. God says, I will put my laws in your minds and write them on their hearts. I have a question. Do you believe that? We look inside at all the things that need to change, and we believe that we're all alone. You're not all alone. God says, I will help create responsiveness in you. Do you believe it? And that's the challenge, isn't it? I'm not saying I believe it all the time, but that's the fight. Sometimes I look inside and I say, it's useless. I'm still dealing with the same thing I dealt with 15 years ago. And what God tells me, Mike, I want you to keep your eyes on something. I know you look inside and see things. But God says, look at me. That's what He's saying to you. Look at me. I will put my law in your mind and write it on your heart. And if you believe that, the good news will start to change you. That promise becomes effective when you believe it. And to believe it, you've got to know it. Look what it says. Look what it says. There's a lot of promises in the Bible. These ones are critical. I think these deserve special attention. Out of all the promises in the Bible, I believe these ones in this passage are the most important. It says they're better promises. It's the promises that Jesus came to give us. And all the promises of God are good, but these are. It says, I will be their God and they will be my people. No longer will a man teach his neighbor or a man his brother, saying, know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest. God with us. And He promises that He will not abandon you. As you look at where you're heading in your life, fear will cause you to feel like you will be abandoned. You will not be abandoned. God says, I will be with you. And here's the question. Do we believe it? Do we believe it? It's hard to believe. But that's what He wants you to know. He wants you to look at that. Sometimes we look at, I need to be this type of person. Don't look at that first. Look at His promises. He promises to be in you. He promises to be with you. And when God's with you, good is ahead of you. You say, wait a minute, Mike, but I blow it. Look what it says. I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more. Do your sins cause God to take His promises back? Do your sins cause God to say, okay, I would have kept my promises if you did everything right, but now you didn't do that right. You looked at that thing. You said that to that person. Now I'm not going to keep my promises. Is that what this verse says? No, there's nothing you can do to cause God to pull back His promises. What does He want you to do? Believe it. Some of us are so caught up in guilt over what we've done, and we say, oh, Mike, I can't. I just did something too terrible. And what I'd say, start believing what He says. Start believing Him. We believe ourselves. Oh, God will never forgive me. That's not what I see here. Do you see that here? Believe Him. Good news isn't good news until it's believed. If we believe this, it would change us. God's not going anywhere with you because you can't do anything that causes Him to pull His promises back. Nothing. I think that's what it says. God in you, God with you, good ahead of you, guaranteed. This is the good news. And good news becomes powerful when we believe it. I would dare say we'll focus on these promises over the next weeks. Spiritually, this is job one for you. I don't care who you are. I'm speaking to everyone here. The most important thing that you could do spiritually is to look at these promises more carefully and increase your ability to believe them. Now, you won't always be able to do it, but this is the direction I'm going in. I'm going in the direction of believing these promises more because that's the direction of growth. We're going to experience communion. New Testament promises. And here's what I think we're to think about when we come to the table. Did not Jesus say, when he held up the cup, this is the new covenant in my blood? That's what he said. This is the new covenant in my blood. I think believing in Jesus and believing, not understanding the New Testament promises, believing that it still is the way it used to be, that if you do everything right, God will bless you, and if you don't, God will curse you. Believing in Jesus and believing in Old Testament promises is like putting new wine in old wineskins. You end up ruining both. Jesus came as Savior, and he comes with new promises. Put your eyes on Jesus and the new promises that he brings. That's putting new wine in new wineskin. What are those promises? God in you, God with you, good ahead of you, guaranteed. We're going to have some music. I think this is what communion tells us. Both tables are over here, so we're going to direct you to come over this way. Take the juice, take the bread, and as you take them, return back to your seats. I won't tell you when to partake of them, but when you drink the juice, what I want you to do is look up at these promises or look down in the passage from Hebrews. And as you take that, say, Jesus, thank you because you shed your blood for me. These are the promises that you want me to believe. Sometime during the course of the next song, and then the worship team will come up. Let's pray. Father, in our wilderness, when we walk around, it's naturally gaze at things that we'd like to have and don't. And pretty soon those things accumulate. You feel very far from us at those times. We start to feel like you don't care about us. And it's not that your promises have changed. It's just that we're gazing at circumstances. We need to look at circumstances, but not gaze at them. We're supposed to gaze at you. That's really hard, Father. It's just, we get so caught up with, and it's so natural to focus on those things. I pray that you give us grace to know your promises. And you do tell us things that are deep in meaning, that you are creative responsiveness, and if you want us to believe that you're in us, with us. You want us to believe that good's ahead of us, guaranteed, despite what we see around us. And when we believe that, we start to rest. Heel marks slowly start to become footprints when we believe in your promises in the midst of difficulties. It doesn't make the difficulties go away. It just makes them less loud. We can hear your voice a little bit more clearly. We feel less alone. Would you teach us about this, God? Especially in the upcoming weeks when we think next week about believing your promises. In Jesus' name. Amen.